Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Shanae Bowie Hussey, and I serve as the Vice President of Health Strategies and Chief Strategic Officer for the Riverside Community Health Foundation. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our volunteers, and our staff, I would like to welcome you to the 2020 Southern California Women's Cancer Conference. Although we cannot meet in person this year, we are excited to welcome you virtually. The mission of the Riverside Community Health Foundation is to improve the health and well-being of our community. And through this conference, it is our hope that you are educated, empowered to advocate, and inspired to thrive from the safety and comfort of your own homes. A little history. In 2006, the Riverside Community Health Foundation gave a seed grant to start an initiative that offered free diagnostic services to uninsured, underinsured, and disadvantaged women who were under 40. Shortly thereafter, a group of breast cancer survivors gathered together to reflect on what would have made their cancer journeys a little easier. From that brainstorm, the Pink Ribbon Place, Riverside's first breast cancer center, was born. Today, the Pink Ribbon Place, which is a program of the Riverside Community Health Foundation, is so proud to continue to be client-driven and to offer cancer support services to individuals and families impacted by all cancers. It doesn't matter the cancer type. Through our Resource Center, you and your loved ones can receive no-cost support services that you need to help navigate you through the cancer journey. This includes individual and family counseling, support groups, education, strength rebuilding classes, client navigation, and products. These products include hats, scarves, wigs, prostheses, bras, face masks, and hand sanitizer, and much more than that. Think about it. As women, the matriarchs and caretakers of our families and communities, we often take on far more than we should. But we keep going, and sometimes we forget that we need to focus on ourselves and our own well-being. Why? Because many times, even when we're diagnosed with chronic disease, it hurts more for us to see the people that we love suffer than it is to suffer alone and in silence. Well, today is about you. To care for others, we must first care for ourselves, and today is about caring for yourself. Whether you're attending today as someone newly diagnosed, as a long-term survivor, as a support person, or as a professional caretaker, we hope you find what you need to educate yourself, advocate for yourself and your loved ones, and most of all, thrive. Welcome to the 2020 Southern California Women's Cancer Conference.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the conference. My name is Abia Lopez, and on behalf of Riverside Community Health Foundation, we would like to welcome you to today's session, The Impact of Cancer Diagnosis on Relationships and Tips to Help Promote Healthy Connection and Communication at this year's virtual SoCal Women's Cancer Conference. We'll be selecting questions to answer during the Q&A portion of this talk, so please send us your questions via the chat feature throughout the presentation. You do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to do so. If you're using a desktop or a laptop to view this session, the chat box will be on your right-hand side, right next to the video. If you would like to interact during the session, but would prefer to be anonymous, you can submit any questions or comments via the Join the Discussion section, which can be found right below the video towards the bottom of the page. If you're using a cell phone, you can find both the chat box and also the Join the Discussion section right below the video. If you like this talk and you're enjoying the session, please let us know by giving us a thumbs up. If you have any trouble accessing any of the talks for this conference, please email us at terry@rchf.org. That is TERRI@rchf.org. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to author, business coach, and psychotherapist at Soul Centered Therapy, Nakomi Higgins, and panelist Kelly Giddings.
Thank you so much. We are super Excited to be here. My name is Nakomi Higgins. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I own and operate my own private practice here in the Chino Hills area, catering to professional women. And so again, thank you. We are super excited to answer questions and dive in. Kelly?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Again, my name is Kelly Giddings, and I'm a 6-year breast cancer survivor. I was triple negative, stage 3.
Awesome. So guys, one of the things that we want to make sure that we acknowledge today is that we understand that we're presenting to a mixed audience of amazing survivors, current patients, as well as loved ones. And so the conversation of communication is a big one, and especially as a therapist, a mental health professional, it is such a norm for couples and families to come in asking, how do we communicate better? How do we argue more effectively? How can we still stay connected as a family? But when we start to integrate life and when we start to integrate the conversations around how do I support my family in dealing with this cancer diagnosis? How do I myself navigate this space? The conversation becomes that much more intricate and unique to the family. So while we will stay fairly broad in the conversation, there will again be some time for you guys to ask questions at the end. The 3 major objectives that we want to focus on today is really acknowledging how a cancer diagnosis may impact relationships. We also want to list the ways in which you can improve communication within your relationships. And to that point, there is a download available for you guys, just a few tips to practice active listening. And the key word is practice, because it does take some time to really get into the rhythm of being a good listener as well as a good speaker. And then we also want to really talk about how to communicate and support your children. All right. So one of the things that I always like to really bring home with my clients is, and I'm not sure if anyone really is aware of the symbolism behind the lotus flower. And what's really powerful about the lotus is that it literally has to grow through mud, through adversity. And the symbolism is essentially that through that adversity, the lotus is able to pull nutrients in order to essentially reach the water surface and bloom in its full beauty. And so while we will be navigating this conversation today, both Kelly and I really want to place emphasis on resilience, and that even through difficult times, through difficult communication, and through this diagnosis, there are gifts and there are opportunities that really can be pulled and naturally contributed to your future.
If I can add to that, Nikki, it's as everybody who's on here has experienced breast cancer, cancer in general in their families or with friends. I mean, the fact of it is it turns your world and the people around you's world upside down. And I think a good point of this is how you decide to deal with that and how you decide to move forward or not, because all this, it really is a choice. So I think this is a perfect example of what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. So a lot of times when my clients come in to really seek support and help, one of the things I always want to understand is, have they made the decision to share their diagnoses with families or loved ones or not? And so when we're talking about the depth and the breadth of communication and healthy communication and effective communication, especially as it relates to a cancer diagnosis, we have to start with one really important decision, and that is to share or not to share. When we look at this decision, there are 3 really important questions. Again, do I share? When is the right time, right? And then what if I choose not to? And that 3rd question is a really important one, because what I have learned through my experience is, while it is more common for head of households, family members that are really responsible for this, financial and emotional stability and support of a family, they're more likely to really be concerned about sharing this information. We also know that a lot of our elderly loved ones oftentimes really wrestle with this idea of wanting to share this information with their family. And I wanted to include space for this because I think if you are on the support side and maybe you're frustrated with your relative because they took some time to disclose this information, or maybe even selected not to share, I think it's really important to understand what are some of the factors that contributed to their decision. The first is a lot of people don't want to be associated with a cancer identity. If you are an individual that is living and existing in your life, and now all of a sudden you've been given this diagnosis, the last thing you want is for people to see you differently and to treat you greatly differently, or to perceive you as weaker. And so that's a contributor. We also have people who are just generally private by nature. And so the idea of sharing their diagnosis feels really uncomfortable. As
And
many, go ahead.
I would like to add to that too.
Yeah.
And on that point of I think when you talk about it, finally, it makes it real. So just so everybody knows too, so as you heard, I'm a breast cancer survivor. At the same time, my mother was going through breast cancer. She was diagnosed 3 months before I was. So we went through it about the same time. So I've got both sides of this. So having to understand what she went through, and then having to admit that even to myself or my friends. So it's right in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's super scary. And I think for a lot of us, especially if you show up as a caretaker, as a nurturer, as emotional support for a lot of your friends and family, this idea of also being a burden, right, can be very overwhelming. And that oftentimes even precedes a diagnosis. It's not uncommon for a lot of my clients to withhold their feelings, to withhold their thoughts, because they don't want to put their stuff, quote unquote, on anyone else, and generally elect to just figure it out on their own. And I think we all have at some point kind of prescribed to that code of conduct. So these are just a few of the reasons why some people opt to or elect not to share their cancer diagnoses. But one of the things that I always want to be really clear about is if it is the decision to withhold, not only do you have to consider the impact on your relationships, you have to consider the impact on yourself. Depending on the stage and the prognosis, when you are withholding that information, what tends to happen is you're allowing your body to trap the stress, the emotional worry, confusion, and fear. And in processing that on your own, what tends to happen is you amplify your own anxiety, depression, you can isolate, and naturally that further heightens the decline of your health. And with debilitation comes further worry. And unfortunately, when the signs of the illness are showing, at some point you are then forced to really communicate with your family what's going on. And family can feel very, very upset at not being included in that conversation for the purposes of their own adjusting to this information. Okay.
And so for me on this point with sharing, I probably I'm gonna say 4 to 6 months, I found the lump myself and didn't know anything. So I chose not to share with anyone. I mean, absolutely anybody that whole time. And that, looking back, put quite a bit of stress on me. But like Nakomi said previously, it was more, I was too afraid to upset, my friends' lives and have people worry before I really knew anything, because I already knew the stress that it was putting on me. But at some point, like she said, it's not healthy to do that. And if you're, if you have cancer, stress on your body, is not good because it breaks it down quite a bit. So when I finally opened up right before I got the diagnosis to one of my friends, which I hope is on, because a lot of my caregivers and friends are on today. So she was one of the first people that I shared with, and she was a little upset. And so were the rest of them that I didn't share, and that they weren't ready to hear that. They were ready to hear it, and I wasn't ready to share it, but they were ready to be supportive. And, I probably should have sooner than later.
Thank you for that. And I mean, just to kind of stress Kelly's point, at the end of the day, only you can be the one to know when to tell and how to tell and share. However, when you make that decision that it's time to share, we open up a whole nother layer of questions. And I really want to pause for a moment to just acknowledge that, for so many people who have been given a cancer diagnosis, this is internal turmoil that's happening before anyone even knows, right? On top of their own processing or your own processing of what this means. And so when you make this decision, okay, I'm going to share, the questions that emerge are, who do I tell? What do I feel comfortable sharing about my diagnosis? When do I want to tell each person? How do I want to tell them? How much do I want to share? And then also, what do I want support to look like? And then, do I want this conversation to follow me into my workplace, right? So these are extremely relevant extremely relevant questions. And that's why I really want to stress the point that this is a great opportunity when you make a decision to share or not to share, to work with a therapist, to work with a pastor, to work with someone that you trust who can help you really wrestle with what the answers to these questions can look like. Because everyone naturally is going to receive the information differently. Kelly, did you want to contribute anything to that point?
Yeah. So like I said, I, shared with each person at, different times, after the first one, started slowly adding people, because again, for me, it was having to face and put what was happening really in front of me. And it's kind of a coping mechanism where I was just really, this isn't happening. I'm going to deal with what's going on today. And that's kind of how I get through. So like Nicole was saying, everybody deals with, stress and everything different. I'd like to say in my friends and my family, I feel like I tend to be like the strength in it. And I've always had to take care of, my daughter and family and, friends, and be that supportive, just strong person. That's just who I've always been. And to have something like that happen was really difficult to have to let go. So it was hard for me to share. And on the flip side of that, so I have a sales position at a very large company. And it was a male at the time, very male dominated company. And I had fear of telling anybody or sharing that. And it just put so much stress on me. And it really wasn't a good thing at the time to do that. But I felt like I was going to be looked at very differently and not taken seriously, and maybe put aside for positions. And since it is male, I had male managers at the time who didn't understand and were younger, and it was just really difficult. So I didn't want to be seen as weak. So I really chose not to share, even as I started treatments. And I had friends who are probably on here now laughing when I say they were begging me to get off work, and I was trying to just power through and just be that super girl and still try to support everything I needed. And that was not the best thing to do. And I finally gave in.
Thank you for that. So, to that point, we want to dive a little bit deeper into what does ongoing, really healthy communication look like. And I want to set the foundation that healthy communication is communication that really allows room for transparency, room for emotional expression, room for being heard, as well as listening. And so we've kind of targeted four specific relationships. The first really starting with your significant other, right? What does healthy communication look like when it comes to a significant other? The first thing that I always say is avoid secrets. It's actually a part of the contracts that I bring my couples on board. So when I'm treating a couple, I have a no secrets policy, because secrets can really further deteriorate a relationship. And I think what we all understand is that life was happening before the cancer diagnosis, right? If you were having challenges before the diagnoses, those challenges don't just disappear and go away. They're still there on top of this new information that greatly shapes not only your experience in your present day, but definitely has you actively thinking about what the future looks like for you. And so, I always say it's really important to avoid secrets because secrets create isolation for both individuals. It's important to also try, even though you as the patient will make the final decision on your care, allowing or including your partner and loved one in those conversations will help them to feel like they are a part of your process. It will help them to feel like that you're also considering the impact on them as well. But it's also important to understand in a relationship that roles are going to change. And to a certain extent, you have to. I work with a lot of strong, very dynamic women who are so used to having things exactly the way they want to have them. They've set up their life in a way where things are managed just right. And then this diagnosis comes and just rocks their world. And they only know what they know how to do. And that's keep things in order and keep things running. But when this happens, it's really important to know that this is the time to be cared for. This is the time, if you have that person who wants to show up in that space, it's important to let yourself be cared for. The other thing, as far as relationships are concerned, it's important to share your feelings. It's important to also create space or to be clear that you don't just want to focus on the cancer, right? Let's allow our conversations to include everything else that we were talking about. Because again, I don't want you to start associating or creating a cancer identity around who I am. It is going to be important for you, and this is kind of a tricky one. You want to be sensitive to the changing emotional needs of your partner. But I say that because what I sometimes see is while I want to encourage you to be sensitive, I try to tell my clients not to go back to that place of, I'm just not going to share because I don't want to be a burden. But just being sensitive is understanding that they too are going to be impacted by this information because they're also really being forced to take into account their role in your care, the significance of the relationship, the future, et cetera, et cetera.
And if I can add a little bit piece to that. So on that, so those of you going through it and those of you who are caregivers, and I know, my caregivers that are on here can attest to this. What I'll say in my experience is that being on both sides is the person with the cancer diagnosis. We know what we have to do. We do our fight every day. It's a personal struggle that we deal with internally and externally, and however we deal with it is different. But I think the hardest part personally is for the caregivers, because think about somebody that you love, and if something happens to them and you have no way to help, you feel really powerless. I mean, having the cancer, you feel kind of powerless, but you know what you have to do with eating healthy or sleeping or just trying to manage your everyday, just whatever you need to deal with from each day to each moment. But as a caregiver, they want to help, you want to be there. And it's really hard. And I think communication's really important, whether it's a significant other, close friends, or family. There's two different dynamics. And so understanding each other, not being afraid to share, and communicate in any way that you can. Because some people, what I'll say is I'm emotionally, I never really dealt with emotions. I hid them a lot. So it was really hard for me to tell people how I felt. So I hid a lot of that in the beginning, and to have to give up control was really hard. And thank God, God bless you, all my friends that are out there. They know me enough and kind of bulldozed me and wouldn't let me say no to them, because I really did in the beginning. And the ones going through it, don't fight it, let them help. That's the best way they can. And the ones that are supporting, do your research on how you should support them and communicate with what works best for them. And that's going to change throughout the whole cancer experience on what the needs might be. So just be open to hear it. And because we all have our personal need to want to do this and want to give this, really listen to each other.
And that's, I mean, to that point too, there are going to be certain points in time, I think, for those of you that are living this reality. I'm kind of just affirming what you're already experiencing, but there are going to be points in times where you don't want to explain it, right? So if you can allow your partner to attend those doctor's appointments with you, if that's something you're comfortable with, definitely, encourage their participation so that they can ask their own questions. The other thing, again, I really do want to stress, if you have the means and the resources to participate in a support group or individual therapy with our individual work with a therapist, I want to encourage it. I think a lot of people assume that to work with a therapist, it's, well, my marriage has to be on the line, or I've got to be going, damn near crazy. But the reality is, a therapist is really an objective person who's not there to cast blame or judge, but to really offer a different perspective at looking at things, but to help you, you and your family, or just yourself, communicate more effectively. So when it comes to processing any fears or concerns that you have, because the reality is, with this diagnosis, you are looking at and thinking about life in different ways. The safe space of a therapist's office, a church counselor's office, anyone that can create space for you and your partner or loved ones to really talk, is a really great opportunity.
And what I'll add to that about caregivers and support, and Nicole, what you said with having somebody at a doctor's appointment, when you're going through this, and those of you who've been through it or who are going through it now, understand that it's just a barrage of information, terms you've never heard of. It's shocking. I mean, the world literally feels like it stops turning, and you're really just not completely there. So I highly, highly recommend that you, at your doctor's visits, at least in the beginning, even if you're afraid to, have somebody that you trust with you, because you are not going to catch all the information that you need to catch, and they can take notes for you. And then the second point is, I suggest getting like a cancer book, so you can keep your notes and your appointments in. And at least if you're not feeling well, you can hand that to your caregiver, so they know about where you're at and where your information is. Because when you go through this, you're going to have a ton of doctors, and it's just really a lot of information. So really, really reach out to the people around you for that support, because, nobody can do this alone, and you really shouldn't.
Yeah. So now we're going to kind of dive in a little bit more with communicating with friends. And I think one of the things that sometimes it's the hardest pill to swallow is that, because everyone has little experience with dealing with, life-threatening illnesses, some of your relationships are going to change, unfortunately. And there are going to be some friends that really show up and love you and care for you and invest the time and energy to see you through this time in your life. And then there are going to be others that, due to their maybe own fear or grief or lack of processing grief, might distance themselves. And so I think it's really important knowing that when you do share this information, people are going to have a different response to the information. And, as human beings, we kind of have to create space for that, and process it on our own to the best of our ability. But one of the things that I always make sure that I encourage my clients to do is reassure your friends and family that they don't have to have the answers, right? I think sometimes a lot of times we surround ourselves by other strong people. I feel like my tribe is really strong women who are also used to having it all together. And so when we have a problem, we're used to kind of bouncing ideas, and this is different, right? And I think what's most important is, I love you, I'm here for you, you got this. Or actually just kind of sitting in, I know this is hard, is enough. And I really want to focus on that word, it's enough. Kelly's already really talked to allowing, people to help. But it's also important to tell people when you just don't want to talk about it. When you don't want to talk about it, when you don't want to be bothered, when you just need space and time, and the people who love you and care for you will get it.
Yeah, and to that point, Yeah, some people, it's because they want, it goes back to that thing I was saying, they want to help so much and there's not a lot they can do. They may be a little overbearing. And so those as caregivers, just, take a step back and look to make sure that you're not, and you're communicating, and those that are going through it, communicate that too, that, hey, I do need a little space, but also know that when you don't, and really try to realize that. And I think, having a counselor will help you realize that, because I, for a while, struggled with dealing with being able to tell people what I needed and what I didn't in the very beginning. But God bless, again, my friends, they know me and they knew exactly what I needed and what I didn't. But to tell them, hey, I can't see you today, or because I tried to stay really positive as I can, because it's just the way I am, just to fight through this thing. And sometimes they would come into the house and literally look at me and be in tears, like the picture here when I had no hair. And I had to ask a few people to leave. And that was hard for me at first. But again, it's up to you to take advantage of communicating and creating boundaries for yourself. A lot of this was really hard to have to talk openly about these things for me. And I finally started doing it, and it worked out. And as you see, like this picture here, just so you guys know, I can't remember how many treatments I was in here. I think I started in February and this was April. This was my daughter's 16th birthday. And I had a really, really bad day, to be honest with you. I was struggling, and there you go.
This picture is so beautiful to me. I actually lost one of my best friends to a form of MS. And when I saw this, the smiles and the laughter and just everything about it warmed my heart and spirit so much. And it's just a great example of, even in the midst of the tough, beauty like this just really exists. So thank you for sharing this one, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. So it's those moments, and you've really got to appreciate that. And, the point that I'll say is we only have today. And in that moment, that's the moment we had. And it was great. It was perfect.
Yeah, thank you. So Kelly kind of elaborated on this earlier. And one of the things that when she and I had a chance to meet before, and she's just amazing, we talked a lot about, just the stress and the worry that comes with communicating your diagnoses to, bringing that information into the workplace. And one of the things that we both kind of were like nodding on is the importance of, communicating with your boss, making sure that HR is involved in that conversation, because it is so important for you to know that you have the right to advocate for what you need, including your privacy. Now, as a therapist, we handle confidentiality like gold. we're really good at being quiet. But I know other people don't work in environments like that. And so advocacy is really, really important. But the other thing that I always really say, because again, I work with so many professional women who are either owning their own business or in leadership positions or just in really demanding positions, that when you're going through this, you have a right to take a break from trying to prove yourself, prove your worthiness, and prove your value. You are enough. You have always been enough. And when you are in this space and time in your life, it is so imperative that you do whatever you can to get the support that you need so that you can thrive, so that you can find the energy to push forward to another day. So those are really the big 3 points. But Kelly, any thoughts that you have? I definitely want to give you some space.
Yeah, and back to that, it was really hard for me to share that at work. So I was very private about it when I was going through it. I went through a point where I was at work and I had chemo and had lost my hair and was wearing a wig, and that was really hard. I'm in field sales, so I see people in person, so it was really hard to deal with. So I really didn't share. I shared with a couple clients and somebody that I knew that had just retired and was going through lymphoma at the time, because I didn't feel safe enough to share that information at the time. I was just terrified. I really was. I'm terrified from the diagnosis and how I was going to be perceived and what my position was. But at some point, you really have to step back and look at, you are the most important thing in your life. And if you don't take care of you, how do you take care of anybody else? This thing is scary. The other thing I found out at work is that there were other people getting it, and to not be able to communicate that it's really hard. You feel alone and lost, and I really did, and it wasn't a good thing. And part of that was my own decision and my choice not to share. So when I came back, I went back to work a year later. I was very open about it, which I am. So I'm an advocate now. And now I have people that come to me asking me, how do they navigate through it? How do they do this? And that's what I want. And there's, managers and directors now all talking about it and checking on people that are sick. And so things have changed quite a bit. And I look at myself, and that point is, it's what I chose and what you choose to do with that, with your information, and how you present that to the people around you and what you want to share. But it really is your choice and what you choose to do.
Yeah.
And there is laws, by the way. So that's the other thing. Once you figure out the laws, and some of the resources here, and I know there was some legal resources on some of these webinars, and you can go back and look at a lot of that, actually talk about what your rights are, HIPAA laws, disability, because a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of HRs don't have that information. And part of the resources with this cancer conference and at the Pink Ribbon Place are there to help advocate for that. So just be empowered and educate yourselves.
Yeah. All right. So communicating with the babies of all ages, right? I think we have kids of all ages. And I think this is the hard part, whether you're caring for a young patient or you are a patient who has to parent through this, trying to figure out the best way to communicate really hard things with your kids is scary and it's heart-wrenching. And one of the things that I have learned, in the earlier part of my career, I worked a lot with kids and a lot of teenagers. I love working with teenagers. But one thing that was clear is that they can sense when something is wrong. Kids are far more intuitive than I think we give them credit for. And when you avoid the topic, what tends to happen is it increases their fear. It increases the worry that maybe the situation is worse than it really is. And so when you are talking with your kids, and we're going to kind of talk about the different ages and what they can kind of comprehend, but when you're talking with your kids, you really want to make sure they understand how your diagnoses will affect them, because they may not say it out loud, especially the older ones, but that's the first place their mind goes to. What does this mean? Like, I'm scared, but what does this mean, right? The other piece is you also want to, especially with the younger kids, but I think across the board, help them understand what changes they can affect, changes to their schedule, but also what changes might occur in your appearance. Because that's kind of what they're thinking about. What's going to happen? How is this going to play out? And so taking a proactive stance, even if it's, I'm not quite sure, but this is what I think that can really help kids, and on a great scale. Now, when you're speaking to kids, I kind of want to dive into how they can comprehend the information. Hopefully this information helps you guys a little bit. So naturally, our 0 to 3-year-olds, they don't understand cancer. So again, it's going to be really important to explain any upcoming events. Hey, mommy, daddy, grandma, auntie, we have to go to a doctor's appointment, and just really clear language. You want to provide reassurance, but you also always want to kind of this constant message of, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to leave you, because that's the fear at that stage of development. For ages 3 to 7, what we see is while they can understand it in very simple terms, they still don't have a full understanding of what you're talking about. So they are going to try to figure out what is the cause? How did this happen? And is it something that I did wrong? And that's really important, because I think parents can, again, provide them assurance that it's not their fault. I think at 3 to 7, they're used to having temper tantrums and fits. And I could see my 7-year-old thinking, was it when you told me that I couldn't play my video game and I cried? Was that the cause? You know what I'm saying? Hold a simple life. And so, as parents, We really want to just be able to assure them that they're not the cause. And again, that consistent message that, hey, I'm going to be here. We're going to be together. I'm going to keep trying to figure this out. With ages 7 to 12, they can understand a little bit more. At that stage of development, pain is really, really big. I don't know if you guys have kids that like don't want to take medication. They like just trying to treat the problem is a headache for certain kids. But at this stage of development, they're afraid of pain. But they're also afraid of how much pain you're in. A lot of worry, a lot of fear, a lot of concern. They're also at a stage where they're hearing different messages from other kids that may have experienced something similar. And so it is imperative during this time in your child's life that you encourage as much open communication as possible. Typically in this stage of development, they're also adopting this idea, I don't want to be a burden. I'll just keep my feelings to myself. You know, my parents, my loved one already has enough to deal with, and I don't want to add to their plate. So transparent communication is key. And the same with teens and young adults. Definitely they can understand the more complex explanations, but let's be honest, they need honest communication, transparent communication, but they also are worried about you. They're also hearing a lot of different messages and experiences and are more likely to withhold information for fear of it adding to your plate. So I hope this kind of gives you a sense of, or some parameters around understanding what your loved one, your kiddos can comprehend. But one of the things that I always encourage is, again, consider individual and family therapy, giving your kids an opportunity to really process how they're feeling in a safe space. I always encourage Sunday powwows, right? Life still happens, but using Sundays as an opportunity to just check in with each other. What's on the agenda for the week? You know, do we want to just order out, or is it family tradition to have a nice meal? Do we want to play games? Use it as an opportunity to just connect with one another very intentionally. Set the expectations of what is needed, okay? You can have a support system or a friend kind of create a chart for little kids to know what their chores look like. The family, you know, everyone can work together to complete bigger tasks. The other things is just communicate your gratitude, communicate that you appreciate the help. And my favorite is just sometimes you got to shift priorities. I am an anal for a clean house, but I'm telling you, there are times when you just have to say, I can't this weekend, and just pick up the house as best as you can. Kelly, you want to add to that?
I'm in agreement there. Like I said, you know, I may have a few control issues. You know, none of my friends out there are probably laughing right now, but so this was really hard, but they were, God bless them, came to help clean. But, you know, back to being a parent and doing this. So learn from me and some of the mistakes that I made. So my daughter was 15 at the time, which to me was really hard to have to tell her something like this, because I know my teen years were terrible and I can't imagine that anybody's were great, right? So having to tell her was a little hard, but I was honest with her. And like Nakomi said, your kids know. So when I finally told her something, she was like, Mom, I knew something was going on. Like, you know, you should have told me, but which was fine. And that was a good conversation. And she took it well. I raised her to be strong, sometimes probably too strong. The problem with communicating with her, I didn't let her know how bad it really was. And, you know, I just talked to my cousin recently about this. And she said, maybe, you know, you kept too much from her and that's affected her. Because to this day, my daughter still doesn't want to talk about it. So that line of communication and learning that, and if you can't do that, to get a third party, to have a counselor. And at the time, I kind of suggested it to her. And I really think that I should have forced that for us to both do it. I just was really trying to keep a norm, and that, thinking back, that's really unrealistic. And so some of those going through this, and if my friend that's on right now, God bless you, I have a coworker and a friend, I'm happy to say, she's going through stage 3 triple positive breast cancer right now. Her crazy self is at work still. Sometimes I talk to check on her and she's still trying to make dinner and try to keep the norm, and she really needs to take care of herself. So this part of this is just to her and to everybody else, you have to take care of yourself. Feeling normal is good, but if something happens to you, then what? So really try to communicate, try to be honest, and obviously, like Nakomi said, tailor that message to the audience. And they know, they know.
So we have a little bit more time, and I want to make sure I carve out enough time for Kelly to answer any specific questions. So I'm briefly going to touch on caregiver burnout. Compassion burnout is real, and anyone who is in a position of caring for people full time can admit that there is a period in which they are exhausted. But when you are caring for a loved one that is struggling with a life-threatening illness such as cancer, it's even scarier. And so these are just a few signs of caregiver burnout. And I do want to give Kelly some time to talk a little bit about that and then transition into questions. But, with these signs, know that it's also normal. Know that to care for someone and to love someone is going to come with a lot of conflicting emotions, and you have a right to feel those emotions. And I know it can be scary at times, but the truth of the matter is we're human beings. So these are just a few signs that you can look out for. Again, this is a great time to reach into community, to ask for support, and to really communicate healthy boundaries. Kelly, I'll turn it over for you, and then we'll just kind of transition into Q&A.
So that on the boundary part, and again, this communication and boundaries, it's really, really important that you understand. And you may not know what these are, but that's what part of this is. I mean, do your research. Google has a ton of resources. I mean, that's what the Pink Ribbon Place is, to help you with some of these things when you don't have guidance. Because one of the things I'll say, as on both sides, as a caregiver, you want to help, you want to do everything, but it weighs on when you love somebody, it weighs on your emotional well-being. And on the other side, as the person going through cancer, so I would have friends show up and you could tell that they were tired and exhausted. And those of you going through it right now, you feel everything. You can feel everything around you, from something that touches your skin. So if somebody walks in the door with a different emotion, we feel that. So you can't care for somebody else if you're not taking care of yourself. So you have to, and it's okay. It's not being selfish, it's being smart. Your health is important, and you can't take care of anybody else if your health is not taken care of. So make sure that you take a break, and that's okay. And make sure that you're communicating with your own, whether you get your own counselor or you have other friends that you can confide in and talk to. Caregiver side, don't be afraid to talk about it, because I guarantee those that are going through it, whatever we share, it's probably 5 to 10 times worse than what we're actually saying. We're too afraid to share because we feel like we're always complaining. So understand, whatever we're telling you, it's 5 to 10 times worse. Don't let that scare you, because we're dealing with it, but just understand that's what we're dealing with. And those going through it, don't be afraid to share what's going on. I really, really encourage you guys to get a counselor, to talk to somebody, and to write down the side effects, because the doctors don't focus on that. They're focusing on getting you better. And I know a lot of them will ask, but make sure you write all of this down, all of your side effects, and then let your doctors know, or have whoever's helping you write those down in that booklet that I told you to keep. So that's what I have for everybody today. Just a lot of communication for you guys.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any particular questions for Kelly that you guys would like to ask?
And then again, the chat feature, if you have the screen enlarged, you have to shrink your screen down, and the chat features to the right of the screen.
Thank you both, Kelly and Nakomi. Wow, that was a great presentation. So thank you so much for sharing your insight, knowledge, advice, and also experiences. Thank you. So we're going to transition to Q&A. So the first question is related to communication. For some, even starting that conversation may be the hardest part. So the first question is, how can I ask my family for space without hurting their feelings?
You got to unmute, Nakomi. But for me, I'll take my stance on it. I think you personally, I found out that I was more afraid to have the discussions, and the fear was worse than the actual outcome of it. And the other thing is, I'm not good all the time at sharing my feelings. Like I said in the beginning, I'm much better now, But what I learned to do is whether you have to do it in a text and have maybe somebody that you can confide in read that and make sure that, it sounds like a good thing to put out, or a letter, or, something that is what do you call it? Like you're not trying to fight with somebody, or, just something, any way that you can communicate, I think is good.
Yeah, I would say keep your communication concise and to the point, and also know that you don't have to take responsibility for anyone's emotional reaction to your truth. So, if you need space, it's okay to just say, I'm really tired and I just need space. That transparency is fair, right? And if they then take that information and process it in a way that is upsetting to them, they have the right to clarify that to you. But at the end of the day, you have a right to say, I'm tired and I need some space.
And if you can, I'll add to that piece too. Clarify to that person what it exactly you need. I'm tired today. Maybe talk to me tomorrow or next week, or, reach out to me by text if you don't mind, because I do get exhausted. Because for me, sometimes I wouldn't respond to people for 3 days because I literally just was too tired to even hold a phone up.
Thank you. Thank you both. So the next question is from the probably other perspective. What should I say or shouldn't say to someone going through cancer?
That's really hard. I always operate from a place, and I'll definitely turn it over to Kelly, but I would definitely, first, if you're someone who is wanting to express support, then just offer that support and offer your availability to take instruction. I'm here with whatever you need. Feel free to let me know what that is. But I do think it's important to, how do I say this? I'm trying to find the right way to say it, and maybe Kelly, you can elaborate on it. But acknowledge that it might be hard, but you don't have to make it kind of the center stage. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it is hard because everybody gets offended by different things. So one of the things, and it's funny because when my mom went through it, I like to try to research, and because I was so stressed for months, I didn't sleep, and that's all I did all night was research cancer stuff. To that point, do not look at statistics when you're researching, and don't look at the basic. I looked at really college stats and just actual facts, no statistics, because that stuff will drive you nuts, and it's not always factual. But what I will say is, so Google, there is some stuff out there, what you should and shouldn't say. Trying to relate to somebody what they're going through in cancer, for us, I'll be blunt, it's insulting when you try to relate. And we know that you mean well, but it really, really is. The best that you can do is really just listen. And like Nakomi said, I'm here for you. And a good thing too is, you say, hey, anything you need, just reach out to me. Yeah, we don't know what we need from time to time. So just check in. Hey, can I had people that would drop off food and just say, hey, I left you some food at the door. I didn't want to bother you. Or would send me some flowers, or make me different things, or just send me a text. Hey, I'm thinking of you. I would get a card here and there. On all of those things, I mean, really, really mean a lot. And I'll show you something. My cousin's probably on and see this. And this is just recently, and every once in a while I still get stuff. So my cousin hand makes some stuff. So the little things really, really do go a long way. So, and just try not to be offended if, you get refused by us, because it's a changing situation. The feelings change. And it's, again, like how I started out, this really flips everybody's world upside down. So just try to listen, I think, would be the best thing. And I think the best thing to say too would, hey, I can't even imagine what you're going through, but I'm here for you, would probably be the best statements you can make.
Yeah. And just in general, I do want to encourage people, be cognizant. I have found that when you ask a person, are you okay? If they're strong, they're going to say, yeah, I'm good. Every client that starts a therapy session with me is like, I'm doing great. And I'm like, but you're showing up. So there's something to talk about. So just, how are you? How are you? And then wait.
Even asking, how the side effects are, hey, how are your side effects doing? That helps to sometimes we just need to get it out, and we don't know it yet either. And, maybe we need a hug, maybe we don't, maybe. And to me, sometimes just my friends coming to just sit with me, and a couple of them, they would sit there and talk. And I like that little bit of normalcy. So sometimes just having somebody be there, maybe you go and clean up their house, and some people will refuse you for a little bit. I didn't want anybody touching anything, and God bless them. They came and cleaned up and ignored me, and I was too sick to fight them. But I really, really appreciated those little things, and a lot of big things in the end. It really, really means a lot.
Thank you. I definitely agree. Definitely listen. And this is something that you learn as you go. And also sometimes you may not even need to ask that person verbally. You kind of sense it, or body language helps a lot too. Thank you both. The next question is, my partner's diagnosed with cancer, but does not want to talk about it. What should I do?
Call Nakomi.
Yes, definitely. She's amazing.
I mean, Kelly, and Kelly, I would love to hear your thoughts, but I think it's a boundary you kind of have to respect. You don't want to be pushy and force someone. You can definitely express your concern. But if it's I think if more angst is coming up for you, definitely call a therapist so that you can process it for yourself, because that's kind of your stuff.
So, and Nakomi's right that and I can't be anything but me, guys. I'm very blunt. That's being selfish. That's about you. So they're going through there, and I'm very like that. I tend to not want to talk about things a lot, and then sometimes I just throw it all up. So waiting, and again, I go back to old school. Write somebody a letter and let them know, hey, how you feel. I'm here for you. Just don't put too much of yourself on there. But I really encourage you to. And that goes back to taking care of yourself as a caregiver, taking space to go visit your friends and your own family and talk about what you're feeling at the very least, because I know even for men, that's really hard to do. But find a counselor. And one of the tips that I'll give you, because that was really hard for me to have to admit that I needed a counselor. I did go to one. Sometimes it takes a little bit to find the fit. I suggest, you may not fit at the first session, and it's like if you had a date, you may not click with somebody right away. So give it a little bit of a chance, and then after that point, if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to fire them. I'm sure Nakomi can vouch for that. It really is a fit on personality. So I highly, highly suggest getting counseling.
I vouch for that 110%.
Thank you both. And that kind of perfectly segues into the next question, which is about counseling. So how to bring up to your partner that you would like to go to couples counseling?
I think you can just start with that. Hey, I think that we can benefit from the support of a couples counselor. And know that when you get to interview counselors, so most counselors provide a 15, 20-minute consultation where you can ask them questions and see if they can really support you. Have your partner on that call so that they can also ask questions. But, I think sometimes we overcomplicate communication, and it's just okay to say, I think we could benefit from that support. And it also is a great way to alleviate some of that pressure by having a counselor come in and help you guys move through things that, I'm telling you, I help some clients resolve things that take them weeks to figure out. And if they were just, bring it in, we figured out right there.
And I'll add to that too, because again, it's about communication and how each person does. And if you're afraid to talk to them, my suggestion is you go find a counselor yourself and start the counseling on your own. And then maybe suggest that they come when you feel like they might be ready, and say, hey, I have all these things I want to talk about. I may not know how to talk to you. I'd like you to come in with this, person. And it's okay if that your partner gets offended or not. You're doing the right thing. Like you take your car in when it's broken. If you break your arm, you go to the doctor. So our minds are a part of our body. You have to take care of that. And you need to take care of the health of your mind also.
Yeah. Good question.
Self-care is extremely important, especially during this situation. So that's all the questions that we have time for. Is there anything that you, Nakomi, or Kelly would like to share? Like last minute thoughts or comments?
I'm just grateful for the opportunity, Kelly. You've been amazing. And I genuinely and sincerely hope that this information is helpful to whomever is listening, and definitely appreciative for just being able to create this space.
For me, I again, I'll just be blunt. Your life after cancer and the people around you is going to be different. And you are going to have to come to terms with that. There's no which way around it. You can't make everything stay the same, and life wouldn't be right without it. There wouldn't be good without bad. I have to say my experience at sometimes was terrible and horrible and things I can't even explain. And we can't as cancer patients, but what I'll say is it's really a choice, as with every day, whether you fight. One of the things I learned through counseling was that I choose to be angry, sad, happy, or mad. Those are choices that we make every day, and how we deal with things is definitely a choice. So whether you choose to communicate, you choose to fight it, regardless of what you choose, it's going to happen. Your life's going to change. And for me, in the end, I have to say it's been the better. I mean, look, I was able here to talk to everybody, and I hope to God that I was able to help anybody out there communicate. And, if you find me on social media, feel free to reach out. And, you've got Nakomi and all, I think, how many counselors do we have, Abigail, at the Pink Ribbon Place?
We have, I think, over 20. So,
and that's all free services. I have to put that in there because I know, and that's one of the reasons why I joined this program, is because when I went through it, just to tell you guys a real quick side story, I was afraid, and this program was in its infancy, so to speak, and I didn't get the support. So now I'm an advocate for it. It's here, the resources are free for those of you who don't have insurance or can't afford it. That's what we do this for. So I hope this all helps. Communicate, make the choice to live, survive, and love each other.
Thank you both again. It was such a pleasure to have you both as part of the conference, and for sharing all the information today. And to our audience, of course, thank you all so much for watching. Please feel free to check out the on-demand sessions, the Author's Corner, survivor testimonials via the links above. This talk will also be added to the on-demand section, so you can also watch it again and share with your friends and family. If you want to know more about the Pink Ribbon Place and all the services that we provide at no cost, please follow us on our Facebook and our Instagram. They're both at the Pink Ribbon Place, or our website as well, pink.rchf.org. At the end of the conference, you will see an email for a survey. So please let us know how we did. And also, best part, get an opportunity to win some fabulous prizes. Our next live session is palliative care, complex pain and symptom management, which will be available to watch today at 4:30 p.m. So don't miss out on that one as well. To watch that talk or see what's coming up next, visit the schedule link above. Again, thank you all so much, and until next time, bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.